And so they blacked out the base, turned off all the lights. So basically they're like, okay, go into lockdown. We're under attack. And they launched these fighters. According to this airman who called in, he said that this pilot that came back was scared shitless. Basically, he's like, he was ashen. He's never seen this man scared, you know? He's like, this guy is a legit fighter pilot. Like, I've never seen this dude scared. And according to him, yeah, it was that thing where there was some structure to these lights and he didn't know what to make of it.
Chris Lehto, thank you for joining me on the AUXORO Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Your channel is wild. Like I've been binging the Ukrainian UFO stuff. I've been looking at the Phoenix Lights, like all the recent videos and some of the most popular ones as well. If the news like CNN, NBC was more like covering the types of things that you covered, I would definitely pay way more attention to the news.
It's way more exciting. Yeah, that's why I love the job too, is that every week I don't know what I'm going to be investigating. I have some sense, but usually it's something new.
So you were an F-16 fighter pilot for 16 years?
Yeah, actually 18 years, even longer. It's 20 years you can retire with a pension from the U.S. Air Force. And so, a lot of people aim for that, to go 20 years and then retire. So yeah, I flew 18 years. The first year and a half was waiting for training and then going into training, etc. And then, traveled all around the world, lived with my family, all these amazing places. It was a great,
okay.
Great
so you got the pension, because I was nervous. You said 20 years, but the first year and a half, 2 years, you were waiting for the training.
Yeah, it's only you don't have to be a pilot, to get. It's any military member that serves 20 years of active duty. It has to be a certain amount of time and specific time, but yeah, you don't have to.
Got it. So before we dive into your channel, I'm super curious. What made you want to become a fighter pilot in the first place? What was the first thing that drew you towards that career path before you even thought about anything closely related to the Lehto Files or UFOs?
Yeah, I guess it was just growing up. I grew up in Houston, in Texas, pretty conservative, and basically it was a very religious area, a suburban area, and I wasn't religious, and I don't know. I just saw the lifestyles of the people all around me, and I just did not want to do that. I would rather explode in a missile. I'd rather get killed, honestly, than grow up and live in that society. So really that's it. Ultimately that's it. The other reason, I wanted something different.
I went to a lot of Sunday masses too growing up, and if I knew that flying around in a cockpit and blowing shit up was another option, I would have quickly ended my religious career earlier than I did.
Well, it's not an either or thing. I think most pilots I'd say I'm kind of in the minority. I think most fighter pilots get there as a kid. They went to an air show, or they loved aviation, or they loved flying. I did grow up watching Star Wars. I loved Return of the Jedi. I watched Return of the Jedi like every day. I think when I was 6, I think I literally watched it every day. So, for me it was, could I be a Jedi Knight? That would be great. Like that would be my passion. My passion wasn't necessarily aviation. I do miss flying, but not that much. I'd just as much rather go diving or surfing or, play Fortnite or something, so yeah, it wasn't my passion to fly, but yeah, I love the intensity of it and the excitement. You go all around the world. And I also like, when I was growing up as well, people, they have thoughts, right? They have ideas. And I just thought everyone around me just had the wrong ideas. Just completely, the assumptions are wrong. That's kind of my base going out the door. You maybe notice in my channel is that the assumptions that we all just kind of go through life on a daily basis. I just had an issue with a lot of those assumptions. And there's not many places in life where it really matters. I think that attracts people to sports a lot, right? Because at sports, there is a right answer. You ran faster than that person or you didn't. There's all these other, maybe the refs messed it up or something. But there's usually a winner and a loser, so it doesn't matter how good you think your training program is, or how good you think you are at tactic, when you get into that sports arena or whatever it is, it's who wins at the end, so I really like that. And the same thing with war. I was just really always interested in war. If there was an assignment in school where I could possibly angle it so I could, do the medieval knights, why were the knights, why did they own the battlefield in ancient medieval times? What about I love the longbows, the longbow archers out of the
Yeah.
UK, they basically broke warfare with this really long, goofy, arrow technology. So I've always just loved, I guess, warfare. It always not loved it. I think war is stupid ultimately. Now I'm on the opposite end where I think we're at a point where we don't need to have warfare anymore. I hope so. But in the past, I was very interested in it because it's just so ridiculous. Especially growing up, you definitely can't kill anyone, right? Especially in America, it's like, life is sacred. They just outlawed abortion, etc. But killing people is fine. We kill people.
Oh yeah.
all the time. So again, it's the
you can't do
hypocrisies
it.
of life.
You can't do it with a coat hanger, but if you have an AK-47, go ahead.
Yeah. So I do. I was always been drawn to warfare for that reason. It's such a dichotomy, I guess, from normal civilization, right? Because normal everyday life is, you can't even slap someone else, But then in war, right? It's like, okay, now go kill everyone in that village. It's like I've had friends that literally, killed hundreds of people at a time. 60 people, 60 ISIS fighters out in the middle of Syria, sleeping overnight. I know two guys in their two F-16s came, wiped them all out, all 60 totally dead, And so it's just so I find it ridiculous actually. And so that I love pointing out these things in our societies and showing people, because I love getting shown those things myself. Every day I love it. Where growing up, I'd watch YouTubers, Vsauce, etc., and they just blow your mind. They have some just amazing concept you never thought about. You're like, oh, that's amazing. And so when I did have the opportunity to even start making YouTube videos, I never thought I'd get to their level. But I hope to, I guess, aim that direction.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people break the shackles of being prisoner to their assumptions through YouTube, because I've had similar experiences where, nothing that even could compare to being in war, but from my religious background, growing up, going to church, then going to Catholic school, always having some sort of authority over my head telling me what's the right way to think about things, what's the wrong way to think about things. These people are the other, you're the ones that are going to be saved. And, sports was also a big part of breaking that chain for me, is being thrown into, a quote unquote arena where it's just your team and someone else, or depending on the sport, just you and someone else. And doesn't matter, what your teachers say, what your parents say. If you suck, it's going to show. And if you're good, it's going to show. And if you suck bad enough for long enough, you're not going to get a chance to play. You have to do something to provide value. You have to, even if the authority figures in that sport are telling you things that are wrong or telling you things that are hindering your performance, you have to figure out a way to finagle that into enhancing your own performance and look at different sources of information, look at better ways to practice, move. For me, it was throwing with baseball, but I've felt similarly too, where it sounds like it took me longer than you to go against my constructed assumptions from my upbringing, but YouTube was a big part of that, where I was seeing other people's points of view, literally anywhere in the world. You can, any background, any situation, people can experience something and upload it. And I'm like, oh, fuck, like, life is not Long Island, New York, going to church, playing baseball. Like there's billions of different experiences literally happening simultaneously around the globe.
Yeah, I found also that traveling is just a huge eye opener, just like you mentioned. I really, and I think that's kind of limits America actually, because the U.S. is just so big that it's very difficult to actually get a different culture, right? And you like to say in the U.S. that it's a melting pot, and it is, but there's a very strong underlying culture in America of the mainstream where all these other kind of melting pots fit in. And because America's so big, I find that it's very difficult to get outside perspectives. Look at languages. I think for me, a huge eye opener is I learned Turkish. So they sent me to the Defense Language School. It's an institute in Monterey, California, for a year. That's why I took the assignment. Actually, they're like, you get to go here. So I went there for a year, learned Turkish. It was amazing. 8 hours a day plus like 2 hours of homework. And then after that year, I went to Turkey and flew with the Turks for 2.5 years. And that just will change your whole perspective on the world. Because before that, I had this, at least I had it, is a superiority kind of complex, right? And it's not just in America, right? Everyone thinks essentially that their country it has some advantages, except for Portugal, right? I live in Portugal. They're
Really?
the opposite. Every other country I've lived in is basically that, they're the best, at least in America, right? There's Americans think they're the best, right? They had God-given right, or the Constitution is amazing.
We're the best at thinking we're the best.
We have the first democracy. I believe in all these things, but I don't think it's that, the democracy has been done before, right? Greece had a democracy, the Romans had a republic. So you didn't do that first. Basically what I see is America is the empire. It's basically just Rome, kind of like the next iteration of the Roman Empire. It's really the European kind of mentality, civilization moved over to America. And now it's like the Roman Empire again. So anyway, just off on a random tangent there. But I think the big point is traveling and getting outside of your culture, outside of your perspective. And what I learned is actually they are just as smart. Actually, it turns out the people over there are not smarter than you. It turns out their culture is different. The way they say things is different, and that comes off often as dumb or how they communicate, etc. But the rest of the world has been watching America for the last several decades, and they are catching up and passing in many instances, and so I don't know. I guess traveling is very important. I think just for the U.S., Americans need to travel more. You need to get out of that country because there is the whole rest of the world there. It's not. It doesn't cover half the globe. It's just a small percentage. So
what was it? What was it about going to the school in Germany or not Germany, Turkey, and working alongside Turkish people? What was it about that experience in particular that shifted your perception? Because I'm sure you traveled to many countries, you meet many different people. For Turkey, that experience there, what was it that stood out to you?
I still can't believe the hospitality. I'm not exaggerating when I say I didn't pay for probably 150, maybe 200 meals.
Wow.
And that was even though they knew I made literally 8 times their salaries. But I would go out they would not let me pay. I mean, just not. And I'm like, look, dude, I'm higher ranking than you. I make 5 times more money than you. I'm going to go pay. There's an order. And then I'd walk up to pay and it's already paid. Like they already did it. And that's just like one instance. And that's just across the whole culture. Like everywhere we went, I didn't get anything. We traveled around that whole country over 2.5 years with my family. My 3rd kid was born there and nothing was ever stolen. We never had any problems, no issues. The one time anything was stolen was we went on the American base. and somebody stole our stroller.
Yeah.
It was a double stroller. They're hard to find. We need to get rid of it anyway. But the point is just the hospitality is unbelievable. The other thing is what again, I never thought about it before I left America, et cetera, is Turkey was an empire. They already were an empire. The same as Portugal, where I live now, they were an empire, and Spain was an empire. UK was an empire. They used to be the America, and they have, and especially the Turks really have that pride. They actually it was the Eastern Empire. It's not taught a lot in U.S. schools, actually, but the Roman Empire, while the Roman Empire was going on, there was also an Eastern Empire. You've heard of it, the Byzantine Empire or whatever, but nobody really knows, at least I didn't really know what's going on over there. That became the Ottoman Empire, and for like literally, I don't know, 7 centuries or something, they ran basically the world. We don't really teach that much.
I remember it from a few multiple choice Byzantine Empire.
Yeah, it's like one word. What was the Ottoman
that's
Empire?
it.
Okay, the Ottoman Empire was just, it ran all of the Middle East. That's why if you go anywhere in the Middle East, you get baklava. You know, if you go anywhere in the Middle East, the food is, there's many similar food across all of it, many similar words across all of it, and that's really from Turkey, from the, not, well, present day Turkey, but the Ottoman Empire, right? You know, the sickle. I almost wore this. Actually, I have it. I actually have this shirt on. This sickle. Right?
Oh, hell yeah.
So that symbol, you know, which has come to be the symbol of Islam, right? It's on the Turkish flag. That actually came from Turkey, you know, so there are empires that we don't really even consider in the Western world, right? In us, it's like, you know, Europe, Roman Empire, Greece, and then they weren't that good. And then we made America, you know, the Constitution, the first democracy. I don't know. I say all that, but again, I fought for the U.S. for 20 years, and if they needed me, I would probably go fight again.
I was just going to say it's easy to forget the ebbs and flows of history, especially when you're living in the middle of what is considered an empire, something like in the United States. And when you start to look back on history, and I'm by no means a historian, expert in history, I'll read a few books here and there. So I especially have to remind myself that there is a cycle to how things go. And no matter how good things seem now, everything's going to change. Changes the nature of the universe, changes the nature of empires, the world. And also going along with the hospitality, I just wanted to say, coming from New York, that's something that has been a bit jarring for me, because New York has such a cold distance compared to other places where everyone kind of keeps their heads down. You don't start conversations. You know, walking up to a stranger in a coffee shop and saying what's up is just like, you're just like, dude, stop being so fucking weird. Like, get away from me, bro. And then going to other places like Colombia or Egypt, I'm in Panama now, and having the same thing happen, people offering to pay for meals, you know, for getting something in an Uber, and the guy's an hour away and it's just a sweatshirt, and he's like, I'll drive it back to you right now. I'm like, no, just like, it's fine, you're an hour away. He's like, no, I'm coming right now. Like, you need this sweatshirt. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, like that would never happen in a million years in New York, and I also wouldn't expect it. So, and at first I had a bit of defensiveness, because I'm like, what does this person want from me? You're giving me this free meal now. You're giving me this free meal now. What do you want me to invest in? You know, are you going to fucking jack my shit while we're eating? I had my spidey senses tingling, and then I slowly realized that, you know, people operate like that in a lot of places around the world, and that is their, you know, the nature of how they do things. And it's very different from a place like New York, where it's more, you eat what you kill, you're out for yourself. There's 8 million people in a city, but it's very isolating. You know, a lot of times you don't even meet the people on your own floor in your apartment. So it's just like very different lifestyles.
Yeah, I think. And we're actually going back to Turkey this summer. My son wanted to see where he was born, and it'd be great to go back. But yeah, the culture was just amazing, and then learning another language, that's also huge. And the key thing I think that I learned from learning another language is, and I think it'd be good for everyone to learn, is that when you first start to learn a language, you know, you just think, okay, I think in English, right? You know, I go to the store. Well, okay, how do I translate store, right? And you'll go look up that word store, and you translate and you translate go, right? But what you find quickly is that you're going to get frustrated if that's how you're going to learn language, right? Because they don't think that way. Like in Turkish, it's literally backwards. You literally say store, going me. You know, that's how you talk. And it changes how you think, right? Because now you think of the store first, and then you think. So the point is, there's many actual different ways to even think about how you even move objects, how you consider life in general, right? The way you even say there's a cup, you have to say this cup exists. That's how you say it in Turkish. This cup exists. That's deep. Right? And in English, you just say there's a cup, right?
That's deep.
But you have to say actually it exists. And it makes sense, right? You're like, oh yeah, if you're saying there's a cup, then you're saying it exists, you know? So there's many different ways to actually skin a cat. And that's what you find with languages, is that there are different ways to think about things. There's different ways to approach basic problems. There's different ways that cultures actually, interrelate and actually work together as a full system, And so once you get into that, you have to get into the full system. But when you go and visit, you don't see that you don't see the full system at all. You don't even understand it. You go in your translator and you're like, okay, store, and you go to talk to somebody and you say that and they have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that just
I'm
raises
learning
awareness.
that a little bit now with Spanish, and just simple things like in English, if you say I like something, I like going to restaurants, I like coffee, but in Spanish with the verb gustar, it's to be pleasing. So instead of you being in charge of what you like, it's the restaurant is pleasing to me, the coffee is pleasing to me. So it's like the world is coming into you for pleasure instead of you going out and being like, I like this car, I like. So it's a subtle difference, but you have to think about it when you're translating it, because if you say direct translation to English, it wouldn't really make sense. And it's a small thing, but it's like, yeah, that's a different way of thinking. Like if you grew up speaking Spanish and you learn English and it's like, I like something, that probably sounds a bit odd to them. Like like things please me. Like the external world is what provides pleasure to me, or external experiences, things like that.
Yes. Yeah. And also you mentioned it there with the shorter words as well, like the pleasantries. You're never going to be able to guess how they say, how they greet each other in Turkish, and it's not the same as English. I was running an exercise or at Anatolian Eagle, and some Americans came there in Turkey, and they were saying, yeah, these Turks don't know any English, and I'm like, really? I thought their English is pretty good, and they're like, yeah, well, I'd be like, oh, in the hallway, I'd be like, oh, hey, how are you doing? And they'd just be like, thanks, But that is literally the answer you're supposed to give in Turkish, right? If somebody says, how are you doing? The answer is not good, right? Because you don't even want to hear that in English. Like when you ask someone, how are you doing? You don't really want to hear how they're doing.
Never.
It's just a pleasantry. How are you doing? Like, I'm happy to see you again. It's great to see you. How are you doing? You don't really want to hear this big.
Don't burden me with your actual feelings.
Says that, bad. I'm doing terrible.
Don't burden me.
The answer is always good anyway. So I really like Turkish because they have these set prompts that you're supposed to say, and I love that. Like if someone asks me how am I doing, I don't want to have to consider my relationship with them. How do I feel? Well, today I feel pretty bad. Do I want to let this person know? Am I going to ruin their day? So no, in there you just say thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking. But that's a miscommunication. So the Americans think, oh, he doesn't know English. It's like, no, he knows English, but he doesn't fully know our culture, right? He doesn't know that you don't say that. You don't say thanks in English. We say thanks to everything else, literally, but not.
Yeah, it's like if your life is going well, you say I'm good, and if your life is falling apart, you say I'm fine. And those are the. I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Yeah, my wife.
And if you don't,
my wife left me and took the kids in the middle of the night. My apartment burned down, and you say I'm fine. Yeah,
I'm good.
It's all right. I'm okay.
I'm fine. It's okay though. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you don't say I'm good or great, people get concerned.
God.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
So I wanted to go back to the fighter pilot days for a second with the actual missions, if you're able to talk about some of the things. So you mentioned you had friends that were at some points taking out 60 ISIS at a time. Did you ever have a mission like that where you got the assignment and you're like, holy fuck, like this shit just got real?
Well, I just did one real tour in Iraq. That was back in 2005. That was for 6 months. And then after that, I realized like I didn't want to go and fight in some foreign war that I thought was stupid in the first place. And the biggest issue is also you just have to leave your family for 6 to 8 months, And I had multiple kids, so I was like, no. So I went into training essentially. A lot of guys just leave the Air Force at that point because with the 20 some odd year wars we were in, guys are just getting burned out. And the mission, you can say, yeah, there's a difference between I'm defending my life, I'll give my life to, defend Washington, D.C., or like I'll give my life to defend Kabul,
Yeah.
And I didn't sign up to defend Kabul or to defend any of those people, to be honest, like, like, why are we fighting for the Iraqis and why are we fighting for the Afghanis? Like, anyway, so I just couldn't understand it. So I was like, but I did enjoy it. And so I stayed in training and basically did mostly training missions, which were quite awesome. I really enjoyed training, got to do a bunch of amazing missions. But as far as real world missions, it's basically just from that one tour of 7 months in Balad. And I actually have a manuscript. I may or may, hopefully I'll release it one day, talking through the missions on there. It's basically short stories of, just the crazy missions you go on in combat.
Are there one of those missions that stand out in particular that you can talk about?
Yeah, I can go through. I get the first part of the book, really. My first day when I arrived at Balad, because basically Balad is a giant base right outside of Baghdad. It's 10 miles north of Baghdad. It was Saddam's main jet base, so it's huge. Even by U.S. standards, it's huge, like 4 miles by 4 miles. And so I never left that base actually on foot. So we stayed there 6 months. You replaced another unit that's there. So there was another unit. My unit at the time was in Italy. So I was a young captain, essentially just became a flight leader. I couldn't even lead 4 ships. I could only lead one other wingman, I couldn't lead another 3 wingmen. And so basically younger guy going there, you have to read tons of books. I mean, they just have like, a bookshelf basically required reading, all the rules, requirements, everything. So, we're pounding all that, trying to get everything set because you're going to be gone for 7 months. So you got to get your whole life in order. So I did read everything, but I didn't study it, right, as hard as I really needed to. You got to know everything cold, especially. But I knew I had 2 days there, because normally you land, you get 2 days before you have to fly, or you're even kind of allowed to fly. And so I was like, okay, I can finish studying while I'm there, right? Procrastination, of course. And then as soon as we land, of course, I know the scheduler in the other squadron that we're replacing. His name is Bonsai. And we land. We flew a commercial jet there. And then in the chow hall, I see him, kind of jet lag. Well, not jet lag at that point. And he says, yeah, can you fly tonight? I was like, what?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm pretty sure that's not legal. And he's like, no, actually, it is legal. I checked all the rules. Because if he's asking me, that means he went through already everybody, so it's already been approved. They're like, yeah, Otis can do it. And I'm like, so I can't say no, and I wouldn't have anyway, And Bonsai, I'd known him previously, amazing fighter pilot. He knew everything. So he's like, well, we'll just sit in the alert shack. Alert shack, you're basically on call to launch. It's like, it hasn't launched in the last 2 months, so it's been really quiet out there. Nothing can happen. We can just talk about everything. I can teach you how to fly here. And I was like, yes, that'd be great. He's been flying here. He's got all the experiences. Perfect. He's a great dude. So he's like, okay, meet me back here. We start at night. It's a 12-hour shift, So he's like, okay, meet me back here. It was like 10:30 or something. And this was in the morning. And so I have to go home, try and sleep, right? So I take some whatever Ambien, get to bed, wake back up, and feel pretty good. So we get out there, I meet him. It's relaxed. He's like, yeah, we'll get there early, 30 minutes early, just so you can kind of get a lay of the land and feel everything out. I'm like, okay. So we go in, he's showing me around the equipment, and their night vision goggles. They're like, here's how you focus your night vision goggles. And then the main guy comes running in, and he's like, launch, launch. launch. And I was like, I just look at Bonsai, I was like, no, we're not going. And he just starts running out the door, So then after that, it was just in the dark, running to these planes that I hadn't. Basically, it's just ready to go. The plane is totally ready to go on an alert launch. I'd never even done an alert launch.
So it's already started up. Like you literally just have to hop in and throttle it, and you're off.
Yeah, it's not started, but all of the electronics the plane's already been started, brought up to a full fighting state, and then brought down in a ready state, if you will. It's like you don't leave it like that, but you leave it like that ready to go. So yeah, you can jump in and take off in less than 4 minutes. And so I was just asses and elbows, man, just running out there. It's dark. I don't even know where the jet is. I don't know where to go. I mean, I just arrived, and so I'm getting set up, making sure I don't make any huge, catastrophic mistakes. And I see Bonsai's jet like taxiing in front of me, like he's about to launch, and I don't know where he's going. I have no idea. And so, I basically just, we gotta go, so I end up taking off right behind him. I see his afterburner take off, and I take off behind him. And as I'm like rolling down the runway, accelerating, I realize I haven't strapped in anything. I'm not strapped into the ejection seat or any of that stuff. And so I'm just kind of sitting there. and then basically he launches, right? And the way you fly when you're in a combat zone is you go really fast and then you go straight up so that you can't get shot at by all these SAM missiles, these man pads. And so he just goes like straight up as well. So I remember just flying, following him straight up. I'm not strapped in. It's like dark, but I hang on and we get to this house, finally get set up. And he's like, yeah, watch this house. And so I'm watching the house and he says, yeah, watch the back. There's always a mosque nearby. So I'm, watching the
So you're
mosque,
kind of just like circling this area.
Yep, it's right in the middle of Baghdad, and so the space is right. So we're over the base. We were there in less than like 6 minutes. Basically from when the guy's like, "Hey," when I'm in there just hanging out, and they're like, "Go!" We're basically overhead this house. 6 or 7 minutes later, and so I finally catch up. Right, we had some time there. Once we're circling, okay, now I'm strapped in. I got everything set up. Okay, where are we? Get all your systems ready. And then these Humvees show up out front. And as soon as they show up, like everyone just starts shooting. Like, I don't know. I was actually covering the back and the moss, so I don't actually know what happened. But then when I look back, the guys are running in the front door. And then we're checking all around. A few minutes later, they popped the all clear.
So the guys in the Humvees rolled up and started shooting at the house, and then it just turned into a gunfight?
I don't know who opened fire first. I wasn't actually even. Basically, the Humvees roll up and everyone just started shooting.
Breaks out
because he was watching. Yeah, my flight lead was watching.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And so you're just watching this. You're just watching this from the cockpit, being like, "What the hell is going on?" Because you don't know anything at this point.
Well, I know at that point it's a pretty simple scenario. Knowing where it is and what's going on was the biggest thing I needed to know, right? If I'm not there on the right radio, I'm not going to know. So I stayed with Bonsai. I got on the right. So I'm following him through the radios and listening to the check-ins and everything. So I have an idea what's going on, but I'm just watching the outside of the house. I'm not. You're looking for squirters, so people that run out the back. So I was checking. I was basically covering the back as these dudes run in.
So do you know what groups the two factions were, the people in the house and the people in the Humvees?
I have no idea. I know good guys and bad guys.
So were the bad guys in the house or good guys in the Humvees? Or
yeah, good guys in the Humvees. Yep. So it was a raid on this house. They wanted, somebody was in there, some high value person. And so they just went in there, and I don't know when they showed up if whoever was in the house attacked them.
So it was a U.S. military operation on whoever was in the house, and you were looking, if some guy, when the shots started firing, he's like, "Fuck this, I'm just gonna head out the back," and that was.
Well, no one left actually. Yeah, no. They just went in, they cleared the building. So they basically go up to the roof and they give us a signal we can see on the roof. And then they just ran out of there. They spent like 5 minutes in. They're probably like you see in the movies, they're grabbing all like the computers and the USB sticks and everything. And I don't know what they're doing in there, to be honest, but that's what I'm guessing. And then they ran out of there and they jump in the Humvee. And then, so the two Humvees drive off. And we're just supporting them as they leave. And one Humvee goes one way on the highway and the other Humvee went the other way. And so we split our forces. So I follow one Humvee and he follows the other. And I remember I lost the Humvee. I was disappointed after. I was pretty upset with myself that I lost it. And really, we haven't tracked, up until that point, I hadn't tracked or tried to track a vehicle through a big city. Just tracking one vehicle in a big city that's hauling the mail, right? It was going, 60 or 70.
Yeah.
Miles an hour. They were piecing out of there, but I lost him, because just the way the systems worked. I hadn't done it in a while, so yeah, I was disappointed. Nothing happened. They got.
Did you end up picking up any high value targets from that one?
I don't know. We didn't even get debriefed. There was a few. There was another couple missions where they did say they got high value targets. One was the number 2 guy. I don't even remember his name at this point, but they captured him, and I remember escorting their helicopters or making sure they were safe.
That's wild. It's also funny to imagine the same thing that I do when I'm driving 30 miles an hour and I forget to put on my seatbelt. I'm kind of like messing with it to put it on without stopping. Just imagining doing that at hundreds of miles an hour, flying straight up, and you're like, shit, I forgot my seatbelt, and you're just fucking trying to strap it in a fighter jet.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
That's crazy. So what was your introduction to the UFO phenomenon? Did you start becoming interested while you were still a pilot? Did it happen after? What was your entrance to that world?
Yeah, it was definitely after. I retired in 2020. Our last assignment was in Spain, and so we just decided to stay in Europe. Love it, and so we moved to Portugal, and then that's where I decided to start making YouTube videos. Needed some additional income, and then it just, like I've already talked about, I never thought I could actually become a good YouTuber or considered a YouTuber. But anyway, started making YouTube videos on that. Actually, it was 5 key breakthrough technologies. Well, I released a video, not a video, but I mentioned that my 4th video was based on AI, actually, and how it's going to change our society, et cetera, through this huge blockchain technology innovation. That was 2 years ago. So I originally started making videos like that, just interesting videos I thought that I was interested in. And then came the David Fravor interview. So David Fravor, he was the pilot of the Nimitz.
Yeah.
Captain David Fravor, he intercepted the Tic Tac. So he went in 2004 off the west coast of the U.S. So he was one of the pilots, and he intercepted the Tic Tac. And I watched a few interviews with him, Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman. And basically all the words he used, everything, it seemed fully legitimate to me. It felt like I was there. And so after that interview, I was just like, can't believe it. I don't see any reason why this guy would lie, and everything he said just seems so legitimate.
Yeah, I saw you say that. I forget which video you mentioned it in. It was probably a few, but you said that David Fravor flipped your whole world upside down once you heard those accounts. And I listened to the Joe Rogan interview and Lex Friedman, which I think it's like 9 hours combined or something like that. But the whole Tic Tac encounter and the training and his experience and going through what he saw step by step, what happened, the radar on the ship, pretty crazy. Like it goes by fast when you're listening to it. Was there a particular portion of the interview that stood out to you where you heard it and you were like, holy shit, like this is flipping my world, this is like an insane thing, or this is something that kind of sparked that drive in you to make content of your own?
Well, I think it was more just the sum of it. There wasn't any. I mean, the story's amazing in itself, but he is, David Fravor. He is he's your mainstream classic fighter pilot. Like I've known many people like him. Not him, right, from somewhere else, but his same background, why he got into aviation, why he was an officer, he is your classic standard, badass fighter pilot. He's clean, he makes clean jokes, clean dad jokes, but he also kills people for a living. This is the dichotomy again of the fighter pilot. And so just him telling that story, I don't know how you could discount it. When you have 3 other people also corroborating it, you have the radars, and so it was just that whole sum that I didn't know it existed. That it was even a possibility. I was like, it broke the wall. There's like a wall of nothing. I know everything, and even though the past has always shown us that we're wrong, I'm going to believe that this is a certainty. It broke that, like it put a crack in that, and once there's a crack in that, then it's kind of like, well, you have to accept that almost anything is actually possible. And so that was a big
Yeah,
change.
that was also just as a third party observer, part of the breaking of the wall for me, because I was familiar with the UFO UAP accounts and uh, ufology from afar, and I just considered it all quackery. Like, no matter who was talking
Yeah.
about it, just there has to be something wrong with this person. They're escaped from a mental institution. They're looking for attention. All sorts of things from the that I gathered from clips that I've seen here and there. Where I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, this is crazy. And then I saw David Fravor go on Joe Rogan, and I'm listening to him talk about, his, upbringing, his training as a pilot, being this highly trained, smart guy who's flying around, seeing things in the sky every day. And there's this encounter that he talks about, the Tic Tac encounter, that just absolutely blows his mind and does not have a clue what could be responsible for it. And my mind wanted to go, okay, well, this has part of this has to be bullshit. Like, back to the old way of thinking, where I'm thinking of the UFO world as, just all kind of quacks. Then I'm like, no, no, no. Like, this guy, like, doesn't seem like he's looking for attention. Like, he's pretty chill dude. He's I'm not even familiar with all of the ramifications of fighter pilot training, and we will definitely go into that. But he's giving summaries of that on Joe Rogan. He's going in detail. This is what I've been trained to do. This is how I evaluate things. This is kind of what the radar means. All those abbreviations. This is what it's doing. This is how fast it's going. And I'm like, okay, and I'm listening. I'm like, shit, like, kind of like this gradual awakening of there are things out there in the sky, in the water, that our, the best trained people that we have on the planet that are interacting with these things have no fucking clue what they are or where they're coming from. And just like, I think that when I was listening to the interview, it didn't sink in because I was paying attention to what he was saying. And then after, I'm sitting around just kind of thinking, like, fuck, like, it's pretty wild. We're just, they're just out there,
Yeah.
and we don't know what they are, what their intentions are. And there are so many reports of them by people on ships, by people in the sky. So yeah, that was for me, just as someone who has zero experience in that realm whatsoever, just as a civilian, I was like, fuck, like, we should probably start getting more accounts, collecting more information, getting more data. Because that's also one of the things that he was talking about on the podcast, in terms of the classification system of the government and the way that the data is collected. And there's no, like, centralization of all of these things coming together to paint a clear picture. And there's a lot of secrecy behind it. And regardless of the source, it would probably be a good idea to put that, connect the dots with what we have and release everything just to figure it out for safety's sake.
Yeah, I mean, basically kind of everything you just said, I agree with. It's kind of why I entered. Again, before that, I thought the same thing. I never considered, Phoenix Lights. I was in Phoenix. I trained in F-16s. It's the biggest base was in Phoenix. And so that's where they supposedly launched the fighters from Phoenix in 96, right? I was there in 2004. There was not any mention, not a single solitary mention of UFOs or anything, that event had even happened, And so I just never even considered it a possibility. And I think that's how everybody wants it to be. I think if you want to maintain your covert nature, then this situation is fine, right? The stigma being out there, and that's the other thing, right? If this is true and all these accounts are real and everything, then basically it's not up to us to really identify, we're going to try as hard as we can to figure out what these things are. But if they're here already and we don't know that they're here, obviously, then they're here covertly. And then the question is, why aren't they identifying themselves? Why don't we know about this if they're here, right? And that would be and again, everybody's like, well, if aliens are here, we would know it, that's a general consensus, because if real aliens were here, they would destroy our destroy our nation or our planet, or something would happen. Something catastrophic would happen. Not what we have now. They just can't believe it.
And it's kind of freaky when you hear various pilots' accounts and they're talking to their superiors and saying, I saw this out there, and they're like, yeah, we know, like they've been out there for a while, like we just haven't said anything. And I'm like, oh, okay, so the superiors in the military know about it. They've been tracking them however they can, and it's just kind of it seems like a normal thing that, yeah, if you're in the sky, you're going to encounter. There's a chance you'll encounter some of these things, and they're just there. Like, it's just we don't know what they are. They're just out there.
The other thing that I consider is that it's just so ubiquitous. I was just playing paddle tennis. It's a huge new sport here. It's an amazing sport. Yesterday, and one of the guys we were playing with is like, yeah, I've seen a UFO. I was like, excuse me, and yeah, when he was 8 years old, he was in the UK with his family of 8. So 8 people standing outside, and they see this object just appear, basically, up in the air and just hovering. And you know what? He drew it, and it was like, it was a box, right? So if you imagine a box like this, and then some like scaffolding down to like another, like a circle. It looked almost like a snow cone, right? So they see this object just basically appear from one direction and stop. And then they're all looking at it and they're like, what is that thing? And then it just pieces out like super fast, departs the area. And so they're like, gee, well, and they call to the airport and they say, hey, they knew, I don't know who, somebody there. Did you guys see anything at the airport? And they said, no, we haven't seen anything. So I guess they didn't think anything of it. 2 days go by and they get a knock on the door, and 4 or 5 suits show up. So government suits show up. This is in the UK, and interrogates them separately. So he remembers it vividly because he was separated. He was 8 years old. He said he's like crying in there. He's getting interrogated, and they each had a draw, and they all drew the same thing. And then, yeah, so it happens, and his 91-year-old dad is still alive. I was like, I would love to talk to that guy and get an idea. But the point is, this stuff, it happens a lot. And I think that key point you mentioned there, where you just think it's crazy that anyone would talk about that stigma is really just kept all the information on this just down in the basement, right? And so, yeah, what's going to happen? Think about that. 8 people see this, they're not, it's a family. They have nothing to gain. Why would they lie about that? It doesn't make sense. And yet everyone just goes along with their day like, oh, it must have been something. Your brain just kind of lets it go. Like, it must have been something else. It's not going to affect my world, and that's how everything is. And I think even up the chain, up the chain, even that person, at the higher command that hears that, he's the same human, right? He's a human. They'll be like, oh, that's crazy. Must have been something else. And that's just how the stigma's batting it down. But definitely now it seems like it's releasing. People like you and me would just kind of, I believe, waking up.
Have you ever seen anything, either as a pilot or as a civilian, that you would classify as a UAP?
No, I don't remember seeing anything out of the ordinary or.
Yeah. So when you're a fighter pilot, and I imagine that you had conversations with other people while you were a pilot that may have seen some things. Is there
not one?
Not while you're a pilot. Okay, because I was going to say, like,
I never even thought about it. I was just like you, man. I thought it was crazy. I was raised mainstream science, so I trained material science, which is physics and chemistry, and then aeronautical science. And the running, the party line is that you can't travel faster than the speed of light. Right? That's proven. We know that. And then, so if that's the case, then the universe is much too big, so nothing could possibly get to where we are. Right? So the Fermi paradox, etc., trillions of stars. But they just say, yeah, there's no way you can travel faster than the speed of light, so there's no way they could possibly arrive here. So, if that's your wall, then of course nothing can ever get here, right? So it doesn't matter what I'll show you. I can, like that one instance I just provided, right? 8 people see this. This object just appears. the police show up, the UK government shows up, whoever it is, the men in black, interrogate them about this. And yet it's not possible, right? It is impossible for any alien object to get to our. That's just one story. Now multiply that times 100,000 or however many stories there are. How many stories do you need? And that's the other thing. I released a video last night from Australia. It was the Narindu Plasma UAP. So it's what I believe is an HD version video of a craft, right? Could it be fake? Of course it can be fake. Do I think it's fake? I don't know. Like, the guy wants to be anonymous. He doesn't want to release his identity, but we background checked him. We've done, criminal background checks on him. I've interviewed him face to face. I was like, dude, you're not lying to me, are you? And he's like, no. So Ross Coulthard interviewed him. So I don't. Why is he doing it? Did he just fake this video to like discredit me or just to screw with everybody?
It's possible, which is even a better reason for why we need some sort of open source declassification data collection system that includes the information that the government has, because the more secrecy that all of these accounts are shrouded in, the less likely we are to sift through the bullshit and get to the real credible accounts that deserve the attention, that deserve the resources to supply the power to be able to figure out what these things are. I'm curious. So if you were, let's say you did see something as a fighter pilot and you're still in the Navy, what was the structure or the basic debrief operation? What would you do when you got back? Would you have a conversation with an appointed UAP person? Would you just kind of tell someone and say, like, kind of hint at it and be like, I think I saw something out there? Was there stigma about it? Like, what was kind of the report process like, and what was the culture around that sort of stuff when you were flying?
Yeah. So again, I never thought of it, never heard the word UFO or UAP probably my whole career in a professional instance. It's a very serious job. It's a very intense job. And most of the time you're just worried about fighting, and kind of what the way they've gone, like Ryan Graves has gone, is that it's a safety hazard, which is a great way to go, because that is the point. It is a safety hazard, and that's really the best way to report these cases, because we do have reporting processes. There's all the systems set up for safety, and so that's how I would, I'd see them coming back. They wouldn't speak out loudly, it depends on the culture in the squadron, but if they said anything, right? If they said anything, then they would go to the safety officer, or the top three, and tell them what they saw, and if they should report it. Probably somebody they're friends with. If they're friends with somebody who's a little bit higher ranking, go talk with them on the side. But it's not going to be like I come back and I go to the UFO reporter officer, and put in my reports. They'd be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, is you get taken off the flying status real quick.
So you get labeled as a risky guy or something like that.
Yeah, and as much as they want to say, the military has huge suicide issues, huge mental health problems, and they huge alcohol issues, and they say they want to deal with it, blah blah blah. But if I as a fighter pilot said I want to go get mental health, right? I want to go talk to a psychologist, I'm pretty sure they would pull me from the. I would suspect, at least, that eyebrows would be raised about me.
Really?
In the future, flying.
So even if you didn't have any.
Because and they say that they're like, oh, you can go talk to a mental health professional, and I'm like, okay, is it recorded? Is it documented that I went and talked to them? And they're like, yeah, we have to document. I was like, I'm not going to. So even. Yeah, I had issue. I would have gladly talked to a mental health professional probably a couple times in my career, and I was like, fuck no, I'm not talking to those people. No, and then they're like, yeah, go ahead, but they don't have the right mentality, right? As soon you have to report it. Like, why? If you really cared about the people and providing mental health to them, then you would just
So
provide the
even
mental
if you
health,
have
right?
zero,
You wouldn't care that it's recorded. What you really care about is finding out where are the crazy people. That's
yeah,
their angle, right? They're trying to find people with mental health issues instead of to kick them out, instead of helping people with mental health issues. And so no, I didn't talk to a psychologist. I just
even if
sucked
you
it
have
up,
zero history,
and I'm sure that's why we have so many people killing themselves.
even if you have
What's that?
zero history of mental health problems, zero family history, and you want to be proactive about therapy or speaking with a mental health professional as a fighter pilot, they would label
Yeah.
you in some way, even if it wasn't officially. There would be some sort of like, yeah, maybe that guy's a little bit of a risk, even if he's just, maybe he's done some shit that he's processing and wants to go to therapy a couple times a month to talk about it. Just being proactive about it. You're not even necessarily treating a specific issue. You're just going to talk to a therapist, seeking professional help. That would be considered something that would get you some more unwanted attention.
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I hope it's changed since then. I hope it's changed. My suspicion is it hasn't. That it's all talk. Like they talk like, again, yeah, if you really want to provide mental health, then you will not document it.
That
You will not track
that's
it. You give free mental
yeah.
health. What the fuck? But they just can't solve the problems, And the problems is their perspective. Like I'm saying it, if you can only see things one way, you're really going to have a hard time in life. You're just going to get bashed because there's many ways to see things and there's many different perspectives on the same issue. And most of the time we're wrong. So I don't know. Yeah. I was quite disappointed with that.
Yeah, you would think, if there was a job that you wanted to make sure your brain and your mental health was in check, it would be the job that requires you to be in a cockpit flying thousands of miles an hour through the air, completing missions. There's so many things that involve brain processes and being able to be clear in the moment, present. So to me, it seems backwards. I would almost think that, now I don't think it because I'm not as naive. I know more about military culture from talking about military guys. But if I had zero exposure to that and I was looking at the job of a fighter pilot, I would say like you should probably encourage this guy or girl to go seek mental health counseling in some aspect, even if it's just proactive, even if it's just like going to the gym and just clearing some shit out before your next mission, because that is such an important part of the job, is being clear in the head and thinking straight and making, trusting your instincts.
Yeah. But you just use the same argument you just used in the reverse, right? Because it is serious and people will die or could die if someone messes up. So you definitely don't want that person flying if they're going through some rough emotional time in their life. So you'll definitely pull them. You get it?
Yeah.
So it's
I could see from both
what I'm
sides.
saying is
I could see, but wouldn't you like? There's never. I mean, everyone's different, but it's hard to imagine a time where you're not going through zero bullshit or zero emotional stuff in your life. There's always something that's creeping up. So would you rather have a system where the pilots have an outlet for, decluttering that sort of stuff to make sure everything is, nice and clear for the mission and optimal? Or would you rather encourage a culture? And I'm just saying I'm not talking to you. I just like to the military in general.
Yes,
a culture where you are incentivizing that stuff to be suppressed, and then the pilots that should seek therapy don't say anything, and then you have some sort of detrimental occurrence in a mission or a misfire, something like that can cause someone's life. So I could see it both ways.
Well, yeah, and again, of course, and when it gets up to the policy, right, and the policymakers, and they're sitting down, and they're in suits, and they're all in their offices, and they're in their meetings, and yeah, it sounds great, and they'll sit there and say that, like you just said, like I think it makes sense. We really need to get these pilots, right? And then you go to the reality of what it actually is like, and really, it's more like a sports team, right? I would say a fighter squadron is just like a professional sports
Yeah.
team, where and they're really, really, really trying to win as hard as they can, and everyone on there is really trying to win, right? And it's even the case where and you're competing against each other, where if someone knew that I'd gone to a psychologist, they would let that information slip. If it possibly, helped them a little bit and hurt me, right? Or they didn't like me or something, that information is going to get out, um, it's just the reality. The same thing with safety, right? Everybody's like, again, all the higher ups are like, yeah, we take safety serious, safety is the serious thing. But if you didn't make people file safety reports, they wouldn't file the safety reports. I mean, it's just the nature of humans. And that's the thing. And if you don't get it, this is the best. If people don't get safety reports, right? Like we had an exercise and there was 0 safety reports, and people were like, wow, we had the safest exercise ever. And I'm like, no, we fucking did not. We had probably one of the most dangerous exercises ever, right? Because if there's no safety reports, what does that mean? There's no reporting, and people just aren't bringing it up. And that's what I think is just with UAPs, no one's brought it up. There's no process of bringing it up. If you bring it up, you're crazy. And why? They're focused on fighting. And just look at what the squadrons did, right? Look at the squadrons in the Nimitz. I mean, they had these Tic Tacs on their radars for weeks. They intercepted them with fighters. They tracked them with their E2 Hawkeye. They're looking at them from binoculars, and they didn't give a shit, right? They didn't care. What's our schedule to get to Iraq? What is our schedule to get downrange so we can fight more humans? Never mind. There's like these alien craft just flying around behind us. It's just, again, if it's not in your world, then you don't really notice it.
So you mentioned the Phoenix Lights incident, and I wanted to go back to that for a second. So you were in Phoenix during that whole encounter, or just
no. Phoenix Lights was in '96, I believe.
Okay, so you're there in 2004. You said
I was there in 03.
Okay,
04,
so you have multiple videos of the Phoenix Lights incident, just going through it on your channel, which people should definitely go check out on Lehto Files. To me, it's one of the most fascinating encounters because unlike the vast majority of UAP reports, this one has 750 witnesses, something like possibly even more than that. I forget the exact number.
I heard more actually, but yeah.
Can you, for people who may not be familiar with the Phoenix Lights, can you describe that incident with, what was going on that we understand, the whole military blackout, jet launches? Like, what is your understanding of what occurred during the Phoenix Lights incident 26 years ago now?
Yeah, wild. So I've done just a few shorter videos. I haven't gone. I interviewed Tom King. He has a YouTube channel called I think it's Tom King Skywatch 4K. And he lives in Phoenix, and he sets out all these camera systems to search for UAPs. He was one of the initial investigators on the Phoenix Lights. Wow. So he knows everything about that. It was awesome talking to him about it. Quite interesting. But basically, what I understand is that you had these lights essentially flying in formation, kind of in a giant V like this, up to a mile across, this V. And so you have lights that are flying in this V formation, and then it almost looks like or supposedly many witnesses said that there was an outline. So it would the stars would go away as this thing flew over silently, right? This big giant V. So it's like
so
a flying
it seems like
V,
there's some sort of structure around the lights.
Light.
It's not just individual lights floating.
And I've heard other things too, where it seems like the lights could actually move. Maybe I can't remember if that was Phoenix Lights, but they would, or if it was always in a set structure. But either way, yeah, the Phoenix Lights, just from my how I would imagine it, is a giant mile across, V-shaped boomerang just floating over the city, flying right. It flew like right down Central Avenue, according to Tom. And so he said he's like, yeah, you got to check this out, because there was an airman, right? He doesn't identify himself, but he is an airman from the base, the Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix there. And he calls into one of the radio stations, and I actually played on one of my videos, and he explains that the pilots launched. So he said these four or two pilots launched to intercept the thing. And that when the guys came back, and he said they also blacked out the whole base. So the base went black, right? If you're under attack, you're going to turn off all the lights on your base so nobody can see where the buildings are, obviously, etc. And so they blacked out the base, turned off all the lights. So basically they're like, okay, go into lockdown. We're under attack. And then supposedly, and they launched these fighters. According to this airman who called in, he said that this pilot that came back was scared shitless. Basically, he's like, he was ashen. He's never seen this man scared. He's like, this guy is a legit dude, fighter pilot. Like, I've never seen this dude scared. And according to him, yeah, it was that thing where there was some structure to these lights, and he didn't know what to make of it. So that's basically from what I understand of the Phoenix lights.
Yeah, I've heard people say that possibly flares could be responsible for that, but it's hard to imagine a fighter pilot being scared shitless by just someone pulling a prank or something, or releasing flares into the sky. And also with 750 witnesses, it's
no, there was flares. So, they're again, I flew in Phoenix, the A-10s, they're an air-to-ground fighter. And so what they'll do is they put out these long burn flares. They're like on parachutes, and they kind of just float down, and they light up the whole area. I mean, you can see with you don't need night vision glasses or goggles or anything. And so that night they did do that. Actually, they did have their flares in a pattern. But those flares have to be in a certain area, in the operating area, in the military training areas, right? But the guy didn't he intercepted the lights down in Central Phoenix.
Okay.
He didn't intercept them over the military operating areas. So as far as, that story on him intercepting these lights, it wouldn't have been flares. But there are videos of the flares and being confused for the lights. So some people, there are videos of flares, and that's what Tom pointed out, is that this video of flares is actually of flares. It's not of the lights. So people look at that often, and they'll go to that video and they'll say, hey, it's all flares, and be like, well, no, those are flares. Yeah. But look over here, and you see alien ships flying by.
Are there any other accounts in modern history that even come close to 100 or 750 plus witnesses for a UAP encounter? Is there anything else like that you've come across?
I don't know about the documented numbers. But the one I'm interested in, why I'm going to Turkey, or one of the reasons, is for the Kumburgaz UFO flaps, I guess. In 2007, 2008, and 2009, there was, I guess, all these saucers just flying around everywhere over Istanbul. And Dr. Lear, he's passed now, but Dr. Lear, he was a big ufologist, big on implants as well. He happened to be there, I think, in 2008. And it was a UFO conference. And as they're getting out of the conference, the UFOs are there. And so they started filming. And I guess Lear said he was there to see them filming these craft. And I have that on my video. Those videos are unbelievable. And why I'm going to Turkey to try and see if that's legitimate.
Yeah.
But basically, according to that was thousands. So it was in the newspapers. It went on for, 3 separate summers. It went on for, I don't know how many days or nights over the summer, but it was a long period of time. And supposedly many thousands, there's 18 million people in Istanbul.
Wow.
Many thousands of people saw it. So my hope is to go there with a sign and just hold it out. Anyone seeing UFOs, in Turkish, and then interview some people. But that's a big one I've heard of. The Belgium wave is a big one.
No, I haven't. What happened there?
That's another really good one. That was in, I don't want to get the date wrong, but I think it was 98. Anyway, F-16s intercept, they went after those as well. So the Belgian wave is amazing. I think 40 different police officers saw it. Or saw these diamond craft. It was diamond-shaped craft. There's 2 of them that I know they saw or reported. And the 40 police, you got the fighters launching, and I think you have a certain number of civilians. There are many mass sightings. You know, it's not just Phoenix Lights. I think Phoenix Lights has the most numbers that I can just think up off the top of my head. But you got Belgian Wave there, and Turkey UFO are interesting as
So
well.
when you go to Istanbul, it'll be like man on the street style almost. You'll hold up the sign and you'll have the microphone, and if someone comes up to you, you speak Turkish and you can just say like, hey, what did you see? Tell me, what happened, and kind of break it down in a video like that.
That's my plan. Yeah. I mean, I hope to get a hold of someone prior, but I've been trying the last year to get a hold of, who made any videos before, who investigated, and just haven't had any luck. So I watched James Fox's Moment of Contact. He went down to Virginia, that just released, I think, last fall. He went to Virginia for the Virginia incident, and that's what he did. Actually, it seemed to work really well. He just held up a sign, anyone seen this?
Yeah.
And he said they had tons of people coming up to him.
Yeah.
So that's my hope.
So to go, we spoke about some of the government classification stuff, the secrecy earlier in the conversation, and I wanted to visit a quote from the conversation that you had with Ryan Graves, which is another great conversation people should check out on Lehto Files. And this has to do with the government secrecy aspect and the classification system. So Ryan Graves says, going forward, we need all the information that's being recorded into these systems. We need the radar tracks to build an analysis of the object's behavior and origin. Until the government releases everything, we're never going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to churn and waste time when we could just be looking at the hard data, which the government has but aren't releasing. I see a lot of video type conversations as pointless. An image of something is not viable proof of anything. It's impossible to draw a conclusion from just a video or a photo. And that stood out to me. That was pretty powerful, because I'm thinking about what Ryan Graves is saying, but I'm also thinking about the current portion of history that we're in, with all of the deep fakes and the ability to render images, where unless you're a highly trained professional, it can be very hard to distinguish what's a real photo, what's fake photo, what's a real video, what's a fake video. Do you share the same sentiments as Ryan Graves about the not being able to trust pure video and needing the tracking data behind it if it is available, and for the government to be releasing all of that and making it public so we could figure this stuff out?
Yeah. I guess first, Belgian Wave is 1989 to 1990.
Okay. Got it.
April. So I guess it's from November 89 to April 1990, which is interesting because then you have the Belgian Wave, which is giant triangles. And then 6 years later, you have the Phoenix Lights, which is giant, I don't know, squares, what are the Carpenter squares? And then you would have Turkey UFO, which is basically like 10 years later, would be another mass sighting, so it's kind of interesting in these mass sightings. I just consider that. It's extremely difficult, right? Well, so again, I've been researching this video I just mentioned. The Narindu Plasma UAP is what I call it. I got to name it. I was like, that's a sweet name. Sounds like Star Wars. On that thing, how do you prove it, right? How do you prove that it's real? And I went through this long investigative process, learning process, and it's very difficult, right? Almost impossible. And look at it this way. I released the video, and immediately, like within 30 seconds, it's like just fake, comments like fake UFO, flashlight, just going out the door, And the point is, look at Gimbal, right? Or Nimitz. In both those engagements, you have literally targeting pod video, right? We have video from a targeting pod, very accurate, very accurate system, in infrared. Okay, we have multiple known pilot, witnesses talking about what they saw. You have radar hits. You have people on the ship, saw them with binoculars, saw these Tic Tacs with binoculars. So you're talking multiple, I don't know how many hundreds of witnesses at that point. And it's still fake, right? We still don't know, like in the national media, like And debunkers are like, it's obviously fake, right? Look at Gimbal as well. They have video, they have radar, they have witnesses. Like, so I don't know. They already have it. It hasn't changed anything. It hasn't changed anything. And then you have Joe Scott. Joe Scott's like the YouTuber. He's like, where are the HD videos? You know, where's the HD videos, everybody? So I named my video, here is the HD video, right, of UFOs. That's the name of it. And that's an HD video, okay? But already it's fake, right? Even before they even analyze it, it's already a fake UFO. So I think it's multiple sensors, I think, is kind of where, and Ryan's considering it from the government, right? Basically, you'll need enough power. You kind of mentioned there, like horsepower, like enough movement, enough traction. And really, in up until now, that's only been able to be done, right? Those types of mass movements can only be done by the government. You know, they're the ones with the money, the organization, the structure to make all that stuff happen. So Ryan, I think, really is going through, he's working with the system. You know, he's trying to get the system to look at the problem. And I think that's great. And I think he should definitely be doing that. Personally, I think the system is the problem, or a big part of the problem, right? I think it's very conspicuous, suspicious to the nth degree, that if there are aliens and they are here, then why don't we know about it? And I think if you look at all of the cases, how many cases I've just mentioned alone or we've talked about, I just think it's very, very suspicious that we don't know, right? And that would imply that we are being kept in the dark actively, that we're being actively kept in the dark. And if that's the case, I don't think working through the system is the best way. Because if you think about how systems work, is you're going to put all of your resources into one spot, right? And then you're going to funnel it up to some like processing system or something. And then you're going to spit out an answer. You know, there are aliens, there aren't aliens, right? But I think it's compromised. I think the system is compromised. Somewhere in there, probably many levels, you have interspersed. How could it be compromised? You're going to have interspersed levels of, you know, insiders, if you will, changing the information or, you know, pushing the stigma. If the stigma's there is enough, that's great, right? Then you don't have to like make people disappear. You don't have to erase people's memories. You don't have to do all these other invasive things, right? If you and me are like, that's not possible, so we're not even going to look at that story. Perfect, job's done. So my own yeah.
So yeah, according to that theory, the government has the information, and it's kind of like a spigot where they're releasing what they choose to release. Maybe it's even in the public's, or maybe it's even in the government's best interest to fan the flames of the UFO phenomenon by spreading misinformation, or, you know, releasing a limited amount of information for some unknown motive, or whatever reason the government wants the public to be fascinated about UFOs, whether or not the source is alien or not. The government, you know, it wouldn't be able to be trusted in that aspect if that theory is correct, and you'd need a different source entirely to mine data from, whether it's a decentralized sharing platform, or some billionaire comes along like Elon Musk style and just builds it out himself and is like, hey, we're gonna, you know, figure out what this is. I actually had a conversation with Christian Van Heist, who appeared on Ryan Graves' podcast, Merged, and he's a commercial pilot. He's been a commercial pilot, I think it for almost 20 years, if not more than 20 years. And he's had...
I interviewed him as well.
Yeah, so one of the things we spoke about with his multiple UAP sightings is, would it be possible, or would it be, could we even get the funding to put cameras on the outside of commercial jetliners to just be constantly recording? Because the things that Christian has recorded come from his own, you know, literally his own pocket. He's pulling out his phone, he's pulling out his camera, and he's snapping photos. And then other than that, he's not recording. He's being a pilot. That's his job. Would it be possible to get the funding to line, you know, commercial jetliners with cameras, do it in a safe way where you're not, it's not a flight risk at all, and then every flight you have multiple angles of thousands of planes a day in the sky, and that would be just an enormous leap in terms of the data input to figure out what these things are, what they're not. And it's definitely possible. We have the technology to do that. The only question is, I'm assuming, that it's very expensive. It's not going to be just GoPros. It's going to be high level cameras, systems to strap it onto the plane, all that stuff. And so it was interesting to talk to him about that. Where we need some sort of funding to push, kind of push the threshold of what we can look at in terms of good hard data.
Yeah, and that's another huge issue, right? Because why would you put cameras out on the end of your planes if you think it's impossible that you're going to find any actual evidence of anything, right? It's not gonna happen. And that's the same thing in the academic world. That's why there's no data on UAPs, or there hasn't been any studies, any actual scientific studies, or very few, if any, on UAPs or UFOs. Because no one is crazy enough to fund that and be seen as funding that, right? And then you're going to basically end your career, essentially. At any rate, up until now, there hasn't been any funding for UFOs like that. And that's the idea, is you're not going to get anything from it. From my perspective, is it has to be profitable. That's what I'm trying to work. That's why I created the NFT company and work through the camera systems and they've tried it before. It's not going to work with only volunteers, right? Only volunteers get you so far. But at some point, man, you need more horsepower. You need the horsepower where people are there all day working, and they're not just doing it in their off time and when they can make a few hours on Sunday. Oh, I can't this week. And really, to do that, you need profit, because that's the way the world goes around, right? If something's profitable, the government will literally have to stop it. They have to stop it, right? Profitable businesses don't have issues, So, and that's why we ended up in this situation we're in today, right? Where humans have been basically subjugated to companies. Companies, basically have humans as slaves in essence, and people's lives essentially suck. And they're like, "Oh, my life sucks," and I'm like, "Yeah." You're not living as a human. You're living as a cog in some giant system that you were born into. And, sorry about that, but we're trying to improve it. Yeah.
Anyway. You've had multiple conversations and back and forths with Mick West, who's probably the most notable debunker. He's a writer, investigator, has his own channel where he has debunked multiple mainstream UAP theories, and there's a lot of back and forth on that in terms of whether what he's doing is credible, with the different conversations he's having, and since you've had multiple interactions with Mick West, I'm curious, how did those conversations go, and what are your thoughts on his work?
No, I mean, I respect Mick West's work. I think he does really good work. He definitely helps the process, because every time he can just immediately and quickly debunk something, that rules out us having to go and analyze it. It just saves everyone else time. He's helping us to track it down, and he's a smart guy. He comes up with these things, and he has a team. He's got Flarky on there, comes up with great stuff. So his Metabunk website, I use it. I go to Metabunk when something comes out and I want to know, like, what is the best argument? What's the best mundane argument? Then I'll go to Metabunk and see what they said, if I haven't already considered it. I know a flashlight is going to be the main argument. A LED flashlight or laser flashlight, something like that, is going to be the main argument. But I don't know how they're going to make it as airtight as they can, but I'll go to Metabunk, and I'll look and say, okay, this is the main mundane argument, which is great. I think we need more of that, actually. And Mick, he has his own person, he's got his personality. I enjoyed working with him, actually. We come from opposite ends, obviously, but he just approaches it from it can't possibly be true, and I approach it from the other, which is it must possibly be true. The numbers are too great, and so we just approach it from different angles. I have seen before where he does seem to backpedal, where I felt like I've won a point from him on something, And then you go to another, I hear him in another interview and I'll be like, well, he's not, what about that point I brought up? So I think he does tend to cherry pick things, which pisses people off in the UFO community. But look, we need both. Like, I get tons of emails, not as much anymore, I guess, but I get a lot of emails of just satellites and bugs and insects, and which is fine. Like, I'm fine getting those emails, and we go through them and we process them. I mean, that's how I found the video in Australia, as my assistant Danny, went through all those things, and as well as me. But I would write back to these people and I'm like, look, man, that is a satellite. It doesn't change direction. It's just continuing in something. If it's an alien spaceship, okay, and it's pretending to be a satellite, it's pretending to be a satellite. I can't tell the difference. So it's got us. There's nothing I can do. Same thing with the bug. If you have to go down to the frames and you can say, look, right here, there's a little mark, and then over here there's a little mark. That's not good enough. We just talked about it. Like we just talked about, we need gimbal. Gimbal level is not good enough, right? What I have, my one camera is I know it's not going to be good enough, but I released it because I think the information, I believe the guy, so I'm putting the information out there. I know the debunkers are going to, light me up with a machine gun, but that's fine. Like, that's okay. We need the debate. The problem is when people aren't debating, when they're not going to put out that video, that crazy video, because they know Mick West is going to make them look like an idiot, or, the other thing is when the debunkers as well, they need to open their minds a little bit. Because if they just say, hey, it's obviously debunked because that looks like a flashlight. Okay, well, go and try and video a flashlight. And I bet it doesn't look like that because a flashlight will gain down your sensor. If you point a flashlight at a video, right? Let's do it right now at a video camera. Okay, let's see what it looks like. I don't know. Okay.
There you go.
Actually, you can kind of see it. You can.
Yeah, no, I see it on the frame. I mean, if it was dark out and you're also working with some camera and effects, you could definitely make a pretty good UFO video with a phone light, especially with the 3 lights on the iPhone. If you could get the other ones to light up, you get some pretty crazy angles, make it work.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can literally fake anything. I mean, just think about it. I can make anything look like, with enough time, enough people, enough smart people out there, they can make any video, even if it's a real video of a UFO, they could make a very, very compelling fake version of it, right? Any balloon, you can make a balloon into pretty much any shape, right? So anything flying in the air, no matter the shape, no matter the colors on it, can be a balloon, or a drone, or, any of those things. So at the end of the day, I think personally, it's not going to come from the governments because we can't trust the governments. Okay, if Ryan is correct and all we need is to get more data and get the government to study it, then what the fuck have they been doing the last 80 years? They haven't been studying it, and if they have, then we haven't heard the information. So it's either I'm totally out to lunch. All these thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, who knows how many people are on the world are just making this shit up. Or there's some weird psychological thing going on or something, or the hundreds of trillions, the uncountable worlds around us are full of life because like we actually believe we're the only life in the universe. This is the funniest. You don't have to worry if we're alone. I promise you we are not alone. Because if we are the only life in the universe, that would be like the biggest joke ever. I think for me, that would just prove the existence of God. Because I would just be like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. There's no way humans are the top. Like, there is no way. We're not even the top on this planet. I know we think we're the top on this planet, but we're not the top on this planet, right? Who makes you do what you need to do?
The thing that I think about is if alien life came out of the closet to human beings and was like, we're here, and we had an official meeting, I wonder how long that would stay in the news cycle. Just knowing the way that human brains operate, it's like, you would think that would just change the face of humanity, and for years and years and years that it would be the only thing that people were talking about. And I could also see it's a news cycle where, Russia invades another country and it's like, well, I mean, the UFOs thing is done. That was fun while it lasted. Aliens, now cat's out of the bag, but we gotta follow the Russia invasion and Kendall Jenner's latest fat loss method and all this, all those stuff, Kim Kardashian's an alien, whatever. That's the thing that I wonder, like how long will it actually stay in the news cycle when it happens? It's crazy to think about. So I want to play you some clips. There's a video on a channel called Cool Worlds where Mick West approaches three of the biggest UFO videos, the ones that were released by the Pentagon, the Flir, the Gimbal, and the Go Fast. And I obviously don't have any expertise in studying UFOs. I don't have the fighter pilot experience. I don't really know what to think when I'm looking at videos like this. And I think what Mick is trying to explain, he explains it well. So it can seem convincing. And so I'm curious to see what your thoughts would be. And I clipped out like these 30-second, minute-long clips of that video that I think are the most compelling. And I'll link the video in the description for people who want to check it out. I'm just going to go to the bathroom real quick and I'll be right back and we can go through some of that. Okay, so this is the first time I'm actually using the media plugin feature of Riverside. I usually add it in post, but hopefully this goes smoothly. So I'm going to play. This is Mick West describing the Flir video, and I'm going to make this live. And let me know that you can see everything and that it's on the screen for you. It says going live right now. Okay, do you see that and hear it?
Yep. Looks and sounds cool. Good. Yep.
I'm going to play this 2-minute clip of him explaining the Flir. Feel free to, put your thumbs up and stop me if you want to talk about something.
All right, well, let's start with the Flir video. That's the oldest video. The Flir video is actually a very small video. It's like 200 pixels wide or something like that. Very, very small and blurry. And it shows like a dark dot in the distance, dark kind of shape. And the camera operator who's in this jet following this thing is cycling through different cameras trying to get a better look at it, but you never really get any good look at it. The object itself, if you pay attention to what's going on, the object itself never actually moves from the center of the screen. It does appear to move, but that's only because the camera is changing. It changes lenses between like a narrow field of view and a wider field of view, or it's changing between the infrared mode and the TV mode, the visible light mode. So whenever it has to change from one camera to another, it loses the lock on the object and has to reacquire it. So what we're seeing basically is an essentially static object. It is actually moving. It's because you can see that the camera is tracking from right to left because you can see the numbers, the heading at the top of the screen changes. So it is moving. So it's entirely consistent with it being a plane that's very far away, probably somewhere in the range of 50 to 100 miles away. And the jet that's following it, again, perhaps doesn't realize just how far away it is and thinks that it's a little bit closer and hence moving a little bit differently, or perhaps is a bit smaller than it actually is. It could be a quite large plane 100 miles away. It wasn't where they thought it was. It's the same thing with the Chilean case. Radar's great if you know where to look, but if you're looking in like sector A and it's in sector Q, then you're not going to see it in sector A. So if they were just looking in a range of, say, like 40 miles in front of them, they're not going to see it on the radar. He got a ping on his radar, I think, and you see the little range crop up, but it shows 99.99, which means it wasn't able to get an actual range distance, which could mean that it was blocking it somehow, but it could also just mean that it was just too far away to get an accurate reading. I think that's...
Okay, so that is the Mick West partial of the Flir explanation, and again, I'll link the full video for people that are curious in the description. What are your thoughts on his take there on the Flir?
Yeah, I mean, again, he sounds he's very smart, and what he's saying is correct, right? In terms of yes, something further away will will be smaller, etc. But he's missing some kind of key points. The biggest thing is angles, right? So he mentions that thing is just static. It's in the center. Well, we don't actually know 100% what that's doing, but we have 100% information on the plane that's recording, right? And we know that's going straight and level, and we know the Mach number, and we know the altitude. So we know fully what the plane is doing. So the camera, we know. And so that thing is going straight and level, right? And in order to track this thing, you have to actually while the plane is flying forward, what he mentions here is it's actually moving because the angle is tracking, right? As you get closer to something, it'll actually have to change angles to track it, right? If that makes sense. So something further away, though, is not going to move in angles nearly as fast, correct?
Yeah, it'll take more time for it to seem like it's doing something different because it's so far away.
Well, imagine a plane flies by you at 50 feet, right? You're going to go like this, and probably get knocked to the ground because the air is knocking you down. Okay, so your angular change is going to be that, right? Now imagine a plane, you can barely see it, right? It's out on the horizon. Your eyes are never going to move as you're tracking this thing. So that's one of the big arguments we had is on this one and on Gimbal is the range. And that's true. There was a big UAP, and he's referencing the Chilean. So again, this is not Air Force fighter pilot, okay? This is not a Navy fighter pilot. This is a Chilean who knows person, okay, saying that they tracked this UAP and it actually turned out to be a jet in the distance. It was an airliner in the distance. But again, that's not a U.S. fighter pilot. It's not a Navy fighter pilot. Not even a fighter pilot, okay? It was just somebody in the Chilean, I don't know.
Got it.
All right. So to summarize is, if the plane was really as far away as the object was really as far away as Mick West is claiming, then it would not be moving across the screen. And you know it's moving across because the angle. If you go back to play it, it says up at the top there's an angle. Actually, they have in the Navy. We don't have it in the Air Force, but they have a number. It tells you the angle off. And since the plane's flying straight and that angle is changing, we actually know the angular change of this object. And if it was far away, it would be going like 5 times faster than the speed of sound. It would be because it's further away, right? If I'm looking at an airplane far away and my head goes like this, something's fucked up, So the point is the angles don't match. So it's not far away.
Got it. Yeah.
You can prove it. We have triangulation. It's called triangulation. So, and we do that in fighter pilot all the time, right? The way to draw, there's all these new systems or whatever, but you have to learn as a fighter pilot how to draw it, right? And I know at 0.75 Mach, it's 1 pen length, every 5 seconds. And so you can just draw it out and you can get a triangulation, right? As if you can get a triangulation of cuts on where this object is, if it always hits here, I know the object's here. If it's out here and I'm making all my cuts here, well, sorry, Mick, it's not some airliner, way far away. It's an object much closer. And if it's an object much closer, then the system should be able to break it out. At 10 nautical miles, you should be able to see something more than just that kind of that airliner at a 60-mile distance. Should be seeing like heat coming out of the exhaust. You should be seeing an exhaust. You should be seeing some sort of angles. And then also interesting is in that video, it's in infrared at the beginning, but then it goes to optical. So optical is TV mode. In our targeting pods, we have 2 basic modes of operation: infrared, so you can see at night, etc., heat, and then you have your optical mode, so you can see. We use it during the day, obviously, and then for color, etc. And in both of those modes, it actually looked the same, right? And if you look at the example Mick gave, it was only in infrared. But an optical, when he goes to optical at that distance, unless it's wildly out of focus, etc. But yeah, the biggest thing is the angles, and that's the key, right? Mick is very smart. He's a very smart dude. He's going to find the best answer, but again, he doesn't have all the information, and if he leaves out some information or he doesn't spend so much time on it, then that's okay. But in this case, yeah, it can't be that far away.
Thank you for breaking that down. So here's the gimbal. Let me know when you can see this on your screen, and then we can start going through it. It's also about the same length, like 1:45, 2 minutes.
What I think is going on with the gimbal video is that it's actually the glare from the infrared, So the engines of a plane are very, very hot, and they show up in the heat-sensitive camera essentially as bright lights. Now, in this video, it's inverted, so hot is black. So it looks like a black object, and you've got the shape of the glare. Now, you're familiar with in astronomy, you often see what looks like a cross over a star or a celestial object of some sort because of the diffraction effect. And this is actual, the aperture of the camera has an effect on what the glare looks like. And what's happening, I think, here is that you're getting essentially a flying saucer-shaped glare, which I've actually replicated with little cameras I have on my own. And it's because it's so bright, because the engine is so hot, it's obscuring the actual outline of the plane, which you might see in the infrared, which wouldn't be very hot anyway, so you wouldn't see very much of it. So all you're seeing is this glare of the engine. Now, where it gets confusing is where it seems to rotate.
Yeah.
And this is quite a difficult thing to explain to people, but essentially, it's kind of a limitation of the camera system that they have. They mount it in such a way that it can only rotate along its forward axis, and it can only do a kind of an up and down rotation around one horizontal axis. And to be able to track something, you actually need 3 axes of rotation. So for it to go left to right, when it's actually tilted down a bit, it actually ends up having to rotate the camera, and that rotation is internally corrected for. But because they're doing an internal correction of the rotation, this means that the scene doesn't rotate, but anything that's an optical artifact within the camera does rotate. So the shape of the glare itself rotates. And this is something I've replicated this exact thing with camera setups of my own, using like a small camera mounted on an arm and rotating it, and then applying derotation. And you see this exact same thing, a kind of a saucer-shaped glare that rotates independently of the horizon, which happens to be my garage in the video I made. But yeah, this is something you can demonstrate that it happens. It makes perfect sense if you look at the actual mechanics of the gimbal system. The gimbal, if you look at the patents, they describe that they have a gimbal lock correction that happens between plus or minus 3 degrees, around 0, and that's the exact point that this rotation happens, around 3.
Okay, so that is the gimbal explanation from Mick West. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is, again, another interesting one. I think he's actually right on the glare, like he's correct. But again, it doesn't change anything, actually. It changes a few things. And this is one of those instances, actually, where Mick I think he's made a correct argument, and no one will listen to him on the ufology side. Like, they will just completely discount his argument about the glare rotating. And I looked into it for a year. We looked in, and at the very end, I finally saw it. I was really trying to see, but I think I don't know. But finally I put my hand over the actual gimbal object, and then I thought in my brain, okay, when do I think it's moving? When do I think the gimbal object is rotating, right? I shouldn't be able to tell if it's independent from the jet, right? So I put my hand over it, and every time I would stop it. I'd be like, okay, it moved, and I stop it, and it moved. And so I think, and then I worked with Bradley. This guy, he's an engineer. Sorry, I blanked on his last name. This was a year ago. He went through and analyzed. Mick actually he did the hard work and built this whole simulator, because he makes video games. So he built this simulator that replicates what he's talking about, that 2 degrees of freedom, etc. He shares it open source. Actually, you can play with it. I played with it. I saw his argument. I brought it up to Bradley.
Is it Paul Bradley?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Yes, that's it. Paul Bradley. Sorry. Yeah. Excellent. Glad you remembered. Yeah, I haven't heard from Paul in I think over a year, so sorry about that. But yeah, he basically agreed that Mick's point was viable, that it makes sense. That if you combine that with the glare rotating, just being able to see it personally, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Now, the point is, and again, and I told this to Mick several times, we argued about this, that doesn't change it, because it's still, so the same argument I just made, right, of Flir, where the jet's going straight and the object is moving and the angles are changing, so it can't be a plane far away, right? That's even more the case here, because if you look at this, a gimbal, it's in a turn. So actually, we're in a left-hand turn here. So the plane's in a left-hand turn, and that little bar, that's going to be at the horizon, right? So we're for sure turning. And if you look, the gimbal object stays basically, there are some angles changing, but we can track it. You can track, like I said, do the triangulation marks, and this object is around, what I got was 6.9 miles away, like no joke. Plus or minus half a mile is what I threw in there. But you're looking at 7 miles away Okay, 7 miles away, the object should look like that flanker that he showed. Where it showed that fighter, and it's like, oh, fighter, and it looks clearly like a Su-27, a flanker, Russian flanker. That's what it should look like. You should be able to see something. The same things I talked about. At 7 nautical miles, this thing should see a thrust. The other important point on this, right, is that if you know how far away something is, even if you don't know what it looks like, you can size it, right? So if I know what the size of an airplane, and like an F-16, and it's a mile away, right, and I know my sensor, now, I'm sorry, if I don't know how far away it is, but I know it's an F-16 now, I can tell you the range based on how big the plane is. This is called mil sizing. So milliradian sizing. It's what we use in fighter pilots. Snipers use it to shoot stuff. Now, based on that, this thing is turning, right? It's less than 7 miles away. If we range it, we know the range, it's less than 20 feet across. Or, I'm sorry, it was less than 30 feet across. Less than 30 feet across. And we don't see any of the body, right? It's going this way. So if it's going this way and it's less than 30 feet across, then where is the plane? Like, where is the thing pushing out the exhaust? Like, it's not there, it can't be a plane because you can't fit a plane that we know about into this glare, right? And then the other question is, why is there glare? I'm pretty sure from 7 miles away, I could identify anything I locked onto with my targeting pod, right? I could literally identify it. But this thing now, you can't, because when you try and shine a light on it, all you get is a big bright glare back, right? And then, so what I'm envisioning now is that it's like this ball of intense light or something. And that's what's flying, because there's no exhaust, there's nothing coming out of it, and there's no plane there. And it's definitely less than 10 miles. I mean, I asked Ryan Graves in our meeting that you mentioned. I was like, Mick West says it's greater than 10 miles. I was like, was it less than 10? He's like, yes. Like, we saw it. We see it with our eye. You're flying too. When I'm flying, it'd be like, okay, you're walking outside and you couldn't identify that you couldn't tell if that car that was driving on the road was 10 miles away or if it's 100 feet away. This is kind of what they're saying, like when I'm flying, I know I get a feeling for how far something is because I'm flying with it. If he's in this turn and this object's far away, then the object would be behind him after 30 seconds. It doesn't make sense. He's in a turn, so after 30 seconds, if you turn, then the object's going to be behind you if it's far away. So I don't know that. Yeah, but then everyone gets so bent out of shape on the glare thing, right? That they're like, they won't even look at his argument. But that argument's correct. So that argument's correct. I think the spinning part of it actually is inside the targeting pod system. But there's a reason it's glaring out everything. And it's only 30 feet across at 7 miles, like at 250 knots up at, I think it was 25,000 feet. Like, we don't know of anything that can do that or has that sort of signature, So yeah, Gimbal's by far the strongest. Yeah.
So as a fighter pilot, how often are pilots misidentifying either the distance or the object?
I mean, you're always doing that to some extent. That's the whole point. You're always misidentifying stuff. And so you're just always checking again. That's why when he locks onto this thing, they're like, what is that? Then they're going to fly towards it and investigate. And so now they're checking, and you're checking off all your other systems. Okay, so if I have a radar hit on it and my wingman also has a radar hit on it, now that's two multiple sensors. It can't be something that my radar is locked onto something, inadvertently. Now there's another sensor there. You're always misidentifying things. So I never trust myself as a pilot. I'm always second checking everything, multiple times. Everything. And you're always updating your response. So I don't know what this thing is right now. Okay, let's go find out. That's what they did, right? So they didn't know what it was. So now they're going to identify it. Okay, what is that thing? Let's go find it. Have I ever gotten anything that I couldn't identify? No. unless you ran out of gas, like, but they're faster than everything. When I talked to Ryan, why they didn't actually engage with those guys is it was safety. They were worried, who are these things? What are these things? What are they doing in here? I'm not going to get close to this thing. I don't know what the fuck it is, and it was getting dark, running out of gas. That's why they left. But, I've never been in a situation where I couldn't go and unable to identify something.
Yeah. So this is the last one, the Go Fast. This is a little bit shorter. It's only about a minute and a half. So let me know when you can see this on the screen and I'll play it.
Yeah, it looks like it's moving really fast, and it looks like it's very close to the water, and this is what people have presented as being. But if you do the math, which isn't very complicated, you can actually use the numbers that are on screen, because it has a range number. You have the altitude of the plane itself, which I think is 22,000 feet. So, and you have an angle down that the camera is looking down. So if you know how high the plane is, you know how far away the object is, and you know the angle down, then you can just use the sine of the angle.
Just trigonometry, yeah.
Yeah, it's just simple. You can simply work out how far away it actually is and how far below the plane it is. And it ends up being halfway between the plane and the water. So it's actually at about, I think, 11 or 12,000 feet. And once you know that, you can also figure out how fast it's going. You can do a kind of 3D recreation of it, which I did. And it doesn't actually have to be moving very fast. It can be as slow as, I think, 40 knots. And the fastest it would be going is actually more like 100 knots. And that range of speeds is quite a reasonable relative speed differential between the wind at 11,000 feet and the wind at 22,000 feet. Because the wind at 22,000 feet can be moving very, very fast, whereas the wind at 11 could be moving slow and or in a different direction. So what it looks like to me is something that's moving at wind speed, and the most likely thing is a balloon. And from that, an even more likely thing is that it's a loose weather balloon.
Okay, so that is Mick West's impression of the Go Fast. What are your thoughts on what he breaks down about that?
Yeah, I think he probably has the strongest argument for this one, because like the other ones, it was using angles. He says it's basically further away, and that I can definitively prove. I think you can definitively prove that Gimbal and Flir are not distant airplanes. Just based on the geometry of the angles and how it moves. With this, you can't, right? So this, with the Go Fast, when I talked to Ryan, he was like, I asked him when we chatted. I don't remember exactly how the exchange went. Was basically I was saying is, I can't prove that it's not a balloon, so in that case, could it be a balloon, et cetera. And the impression I got is that it was down low. It was down lower. That's the impression I get. Because only the pilots would know at this point, because the intercept continued, if you remember. And flying, again, as a pilot, I'm going to have, that could happen, what he's talking about, that parallax error, where there just happens to be a balloon or an object halfway in. But as a pilot now, I'm going to figure that out as this engagement keeps going.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm going to find that out, like I talked about in a minute. Yeah, I can't tell if that thing's moving right now, but as I get closer to it, right, as I walk up to that, I don't know what type of phone that is at a distance, right? But as I walk up to it, right, now I get closer and I can tell, but if you're walking up to something and it just keeps staying further and further and further away, okay, that object's further than I thought, right? So in this case, I think they would have, I can't prove that it's not a balloon halfway between them, but based on the pilots and what I talked to Ryan about, I believe the pilots know, because they continued the intercept, that this thing is not just halfway in between them, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
the other point on that is the big point on this is everything works perfect in a simulator, right? And I know Mick's built simulators before, and that's the impression, but that range that you see, where is that range coming from? And this is where you get into issues with classification and all that stuff, right? You're talking about sensors, et cetera. But if you look at where the targeting pod's aiming, and you look at the unclassified F-16 radar, it's outside of the radar vision, right? So where is the range coming from? Personally, I think that range that we're seeing is actually range to their to to their steer point. So if you're flying around a circle, or if there's a point out there, then you would also get the range, because the range doesn't match. It didn't match for me either way, really. Even how Mick is arguing that it's in the middle, it didn't really match. So I would say everything works great in the simulator, but those ranges and everything that he's talking about, they have to come from, in the real world, they have to come from something. And that's a lot of the job as a fighter pilot. If you talk to like an air-to-air fighter pilot that only focuses on air-to-air, literally like 95% of their job is identifying the enemy, right? Well, maybe less. A lot of it's fighting them after that. But correctly identifying the enemy at range, right? Identifying them at range. And what you find is when you get into the real world, it's much dirtier. Everything is dirty. It doesn't work like the simulator. Simulator, everything works great. Yeah, we just went there. So like Mick's saying, you just check this angle and you just check the numbers right there, you know? Yeah, I think any fighter pilot would kind of laugh at that, you know, because no, the number, you check the number. I know exactly where that number is coming from, like exactly. You know, I know the specific system. I know the limitations on that system. I know the capabilities of it, right? And so just, anyway. So the point is, I can't definitively prove it based on what Ryan Graves said and the anecdotes from the pilots is that this thing is down lower. So what I tracked it as, what I estimated it was 1,000 to 2,000 feet above the water and going around 0.9 Mach. Maybe supersonic. So that's what.
Can you define the steer point for a layman like me versus whatever point Mick West may be calculating from? How does the steer point differ?
Well, you just. I don't know all the intricacies of the F-18. You know, I flew the F-16s in the Air Force. This is F-18s in the Navy. It's very similar, but you have. There's always sensors of interest. You know, where are your systems pointing to? Where is your radar searching? Where are your missiles pointing? Where is your wingman pointing? These are called your sensors of interest. And basically, you'll have those points. And a steer point would be where I'm going for my mech. You know, in your GPS, you're going to put in, okay, go home. You know, how do I get home? Well, often that can be, you would hand that off to, or target, right? How do I get home? Or how do I bomb this target? You're going to use basically the same setup. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to have my whole system look at that point. And if I'm flying there because I want to land there, I'm going to have my whole system look at that point, you know? And if I want to blow it up, I'm going to have my whole system look at that point. So basically that point can change, right? So which point is it? Is it your navigation steer point? Is it your sensor of interest? Is it your targeting pod? Is it your radar? Is your missile tracking there? So there's all these kind of variables on ranges and angles. And yeah, I wouldn't. No fighter pilot is going to bet his life on numbers he sees on the screen, right? Just not on that. It's going to be everything else. It's going to be, where am I flying? What are all the other things? Just like you would in
So
real life,
the real world range acquisition, like you said, is much murkier, much dirtier than doing like a sheet of paper with a ruler,
again, real world,
like
right?
drawing angles on a sheet of paper. It's much more convoluted than that when you're in a real world situation.
Shit works great on paper in the boardroom when you're all in your little suits and giving your little meeting. Yeah, we'll just ask them to go and talk to mental health professionals. You know, that'll solve it. I mean, look in the first Iraq War, right? Our bombs use GPS. We have JDAMs. You know, they invented the JDAM, Joint Direct Attack Munitions. Basically, just plug in the coordinates and it blows the shit out of whatever the coordinates are in, right? Yeah. Well, Saddam, right? He had GPS jammers. They had these GPS jamming systems bought from the Russians or whoever, and so that was going to totally negate our all of our weapons, right? All of our attacks. Well, we literally bombed the GPS jammers with the GPS bombs, literally. So that's just how it goes. Yeah. So it's great.
Bomb the GPS jammers.
And again, that's another great part of war. That's why I love it.
Bomb the GPS jammers.
You can say you're better or not.
Bombs. That like saying that sentence just folds my mind into. I feel like my brain just split in half trying to comprehend that. You bomb the GPS jammers with the GPS bombs. So that's you're using your GPS to take out their GPS essentially.
They're trying to jam our weapons from receiving your GPS signal. You know, imagine like you're in. Yeah, if I had a GPS jammer next to your GPS, you know, in your car or whatever, it would
scrambles that.
It wouldn't get the signal. It would just say, you know, searching for satellites, searching for satellites, searching, because it just can't see, right? It's looking, but it can't see or hear. Yeah, we bombed those systems with GPS guided weapons.
Okay, so that makes sense. So you figured out where their GPS jammers were, and you used GPS to take those jammers out.
Yeah, it's like saying, oh, we have laser defense systems, and then we blew them up with our lasers.
Got it.
It's the same thing. It's the point is the whole point is the real world is a vastly different game than your imaginary boardroom simulator. You know, and that's why we train so hard. That's why militaries train so hard, right? Because it's so easy to get lulled in this. Yeah, we're really good. Look, we train against each other. We're great fighters, you know, and then you fight someone, you know, who's really serious and you get smoked, you know, like anytime the Russians have come against us, we've just slaughtered them. I'm not intimidated at all by Russians.
Yeah, I appreciate you breaking down those videos, because as a civilian, I'm looking at videos like that and I'm, you know, it's very logical. It's very methodical. And then the thought in the back of my mind, listening to conversations with people like David Fravor and yourself and Ryan Graves, I'm thinking, okay, are fighter pilots being consistently bewildered by weather balloons and other planes? Is that something that's going on? And I obviously don't have the experience to put myself in the cockpit and see what that's like. And so I appreciate you breaking the videos like that down and even conceding that there are valuable parts of what those videos present, because it does help sift through some of the bullshit. And there is a lot of good processes and science that goes into making videos like that. But that's also the thing where I'm like, are highly trained pilots, like, could this all be explained away? Just like the hundreds and hundreds of pilots coming forward with weather balloons. And I'm like, there has to be other shit that's going on in the cockpit that you might not see on paper that would add to the breakdown of what the average person like myself is seeing on a gimbal video or a Go Fast or things like that. So I think it's important to have both sides, where you have people that are looking at it kind of in a very clean, scientific manner. And then you also have like the person going like, hold up, like that's not how it works when you're actually in the cockpit. Like you have to think about all this other shit.
Yeah, I think it is really important though to have the two sides, or at least to consider the debate. You know, I think it's kind of unfortunate that, I guess Mick gets so much heat for his work. You know, that he debunks these cases, and maybe it's because he just will never believe, you know, or that's people's belief. But talking to Ted Rowe, you know, he's like, look, we need to talk about these things. He mentioned that recently the Aguadilla case, the Puerto Rico case, you know, the 2014 Aguadilla, looks like this orbs going underwater out in Puerto Rico. He said that recently there was a good case against it, you know, a good case giving an argument for a mundane reason. And he was happy about it. He was excited because he's like, look, you know, and I thought that case was bulletproof, but I'm like, yeah, let's hear it. You know, if that's fake, it'll be disappointing, or not fake. If it's incorrect or something, I honestly can't see it because they had radar data, etc. But he said it's healthy. Like, we have to have the debates. We have to be able to talk about it. If you're just out there, if it's such a caustic environment, and Mick West, even his glare argument is legit, you know, that's a legit argument. And the fact that no one will even take it seriously, but it's true. Yeah, that's kind of, that doesn't look good, pose well for the future, I think, on finding the truth. And so I don't know. I hope to not, I'm obviously biased. I think I believe the humans that say that they've seen all these things. I believe them. But I want to limit that and understand that, I don't know everything. I haven't seen
Yeah.
any alien craft with my own eyes. So to be open-minded.
So going off of the mainstream UAP discussions, like the one with Ryan Graves and David Fravor on very popular platforms, I have to ask you about what you think of the Bob Lazar story, because everything with the reverse engineering of alien spacecraft, having a secret government facility, and there's hours and hours and hours of discussion, and I had I don't know. I listened to it just like the David Fravor conversation, and David Fravor has much more straightforward credentials and qualifications, and then Bob Lazar's where it starts to get a little bit murky on where he actually went to school, what his qualifications are. So I'm curious for you, when you listen to that conversation and when you hear Bob Lazar speak about his experiences, what are your thoughts on the Lazar story?
I think I'm probably the same as you, it's an amazing story. I love hearing about it. There's some really compelling parts about it. And then you talk to people in the UFO world that I respect, and they're just like, it's total hoax, total fake, stay away. I think that's like, I mean, if it is real, then that's how I kind of would appear it being real, is what he's explained. Everything he's explained, if it's real, and I don't know, then it seems to make sense. I think it's amazing. Well, probably one of the best parts of it that I like is the part where he explains in his video, where he drives up in the Corvette. So awesome. That's my favorite UFO video of all time. Yeah. He explains the universe, essentially. He talks about gravity B, gravity A, and he talks about the solar system makeups. And I really, really like this. It goes into my own theory, where, again, we think we know all this stuff and we have just no clue what's going on in even the basic solar systems around us. We didn't even know there was a black hole. I think it's only 300 light years away. There's so much going on. So anyway, Bob in this video, he explains about solar systems, and that our solar system actually doesn't have that key element 115. It's that element that powered the spaceship. It's this element that he said would exist, and we hadn't found it yet back when he said it would exist, and then we found it, right? But you could say on the periodic table, okay, 13, 14, okay, we'll find 15, etc. Either way, I thought it was compelling. His argument is that we don't have those heavier elements naturally occurring in our solar system in a stable environment because our star is not big enough. So what he's suggesting, we have like a Sol 3, he said. And then around us, you would have these other much bigger suns, bigger solar systems. And what it reminded me of was elements. So elements on the periodic table. If you hydrogen, you have one nucleus and you have like one orbiting body. So my whole theory, I explain it more on my channel, etc., is that basically there's patterns to the universe, and solar systems seem very similar to atomic systems, how they're built. You have the nucleus very in the center, and then you have these orbiting bodies. So in that case, that was kind of my favorite part of his anecdotes, if you will, is that we're surrounded by all these different types of solar systems that are similar to different types of elements. And in that sense, you could have these heavier elements sent into our solar system. And that's where I was thinking Oumuamua. If you think of Oumuamua, it's that intergalactic first interstellar meteor coming into our solar system. It seems very rare from all our astronomers saying it's this hugely rare occurrence. But if you did have these other civilizations, for instance, and they were trying to help out or wanted to, propel future civilizations, they could send these objects, like heavy, imagine just a whole big building of 115, and they just fly it through solar systems. And whenever we are good enough, or when we've reached a certain maturity, then we can capture these things. And so we would capture Oumuamua, if you imagine, and now we have 115, and now we can use it. We don't have to create it from natural state. Now we can use it, and that would be some sort of, process that evolves the solar systems, etc. So I don't know. It's a lot of it makes sense to me. If the government was hiding a secret program, then Bob Lazar's story seems to check all those boxes, but I guess he could have made a story to fill
I'm in a similar
boxes.
boat where I find it so compelling, and I'm 100% biased because I want to believe in cool shit. Of course, I hope that there's fucking alien spacecraft out there that we're trying to reverse engineer, and that there are people that are selected to work on it, and there's a secret government program. That is something so exciting and compelling, and I hear someone talk about it and I'm like, fuck yeah, like let's dive into this. And then there are other things like when you dive a bit deeper and you go into Lazar's claims about going to MIT and Caltech, and he says that the government wiped the digital records. But then, this is back in the, 70s or 80s whenever he went to school. And it's like, there's also print records that everyone got a yearbook. Everyone got alumni newsletters. I'm like, you're telling me the government went into everyone's home and like cut out the square of his picture from all these yearbooks? I'm like, there has to be something else here. Maybe his whole story isn't false, but and I don't know why, if everything else is true, he would feel the need to lie about his education, because the what he's talking about is compelling enough. Yeah. You don't need the credentials to go behind it with the education. Just like, say I consider myself a physicist, but I don't have the classical MIT training. That's fine. Like I could get behind that. But I see the lack of the credentials with the education and the shadiness of that. And I also hear other physicists talk about his story and say, get me in the room with him. I've worked with physicists my whole life. I can tell who's a physicist and who's not. Just like, get me on a podcast with Bob Lazar and I'll tell you in 5 minutes whether the dude is legit or not. So
he's definitely a scientist. I mean, he has his company. I mean, he's definitely a nuclear scientist.
I know. Yeah, I'm not questioning his expertise in the things that he's built and what has been publicly demonstrated. I just have my own hesitations around the seeming education gaps, or the things that have been wiped that seem, nearly impossible to wipe from the face of the earth. It's not that it's impossible. Maybe they do go to people's houses and they say like, give me your yearbook, and you're like, what? And they cut out the photo. But like I'm kind of in a similar boat when it comes to wanting to, finding certain aspects of it compelling, and other things I need more foundation to be able to accept certain parameters of that story. Yeah.
Well, I gotta go soon, buddy.
Okay. Yes.
Gotta make my own content.
Yes. Do you have 5 minutes? I just wanted to ask you about Yeah, sure.
That's fine.
We'll end off, and thank you again for being so generous with your time. There's a story in the American Military News about the Robert Salas nuclear site encounter. And let's end off on this. So I'll read you the excerpt from the story, and then you can give me your thoughts on it. So this is from American Military News. And they write that 2 Air Force veterans say they have testified to the federal government about UFOs that allegedly shot a missile out of the sky and suddenly disabled 10 nuclear warheads with no explanation. That office was formed last year by the Department of Defense to investigate reports of anomalous, unidentified space, airborne, submerged, and transmedium objects as described by a press release. Its criterion followed a high-profile Pentagon report's disclosure of more than 140 times troops had spotted unidentified aerial phenomena that were never explained. This year's annual military budget called for UAP reports to be investigated dating as far back as January 1st, 1945. Robert Salas, a former ICBM launch officer, and Robert Jacobs, another former Air Force officer, have recounted those experiences from the 1960s to the government's new All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the Daily Mail reported. Now AARO has reportedly heard testimony from Salas about an alleged 1967 incident in which 10 nuclear missiles were inexplicably disabled for several hours at Montana's Malmstrom Malmstrom Air Force Base after a UFO flew over the installation. Pentagon officials previously said that they had heard the story but had no official data on it. Salas said his testimony finally came after 5 decades of wanting to tell the story to a government agency. AARO has now also heard from Jacobs, who was filming a test missile launch in 1964 when a saucer-shaped object allegedly fired beams of light at the warhead, causing it to tumble out of the sky. So the first thing I thought when I heard this was, what the fuck? Like, I have materials on my reading list to read about nuclear encounters at or UAP encounters at nuclear sites. I know there's like a laundry list of things to go through. And I know you've looked into this as well based on your channel. What are your thoughts on this recent occurrence of the government taking interest in the Robert Salas case and the Jacobs case about the UAP active engagement with nuclear sites and nuclear missiles?
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Yeah, I think they should have done it like you said, 5 decades. I think Robert Salas, every 5 years, he would go to DC and do this big conference on the UFOs, and he'd bring in like Robert Hastings and all these other guys, Robert Jacobs, like a lot of Roberts, a lot of Bobs. Yeah. Those stories are both amazing, and they both have multiple witnesses, right? Robert Jacobs, actually, the guy he worked with, McMahon, the other officer who corroborated all of his story, he passed away, actually. But another officer, that's 2 Air Force officers right there corroborating that story, lieutenant colonels, I think. And then Robert Salas, he had other people there, when he was running the missile. I don't know if he was running the underground bunker, but he was there as well. So yeah, I'm very happy to hear it. And I think they had to. They were forced. Gallagher forced them to analyze this. Hopefully they would have, but it was really Representative Gallagher, I think, and he asked at that UFO conference, at the hearing last year, about Robert Salas. He said, "Yeah, have you heard of Robert Salas?" And like, we have nothing on Robert Salas, And so he entered that into the record. He said, "Okay, we need to put Robert Salas in there." I think it's awesome, man. I think we're gonna have hearings coming up this summer, and you're gonna hear that out in the open. Or it sounds like they've already spoken to him.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited too. Chris Lehto, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show and breaking everything down and sharing your work and your expertise. Where are the best places for people to follow you? We mentioned the YouTube channel. So there's Lehto Files. Where else can people keep up with your work?
And I tweet, so I'm active on Twitter, Lehto Files, a little bit on Instagram. My Twitter handle is Chris Otis78. Otis was my fighter pilot call sign, actually.
Awesome. So yes, and everything we discussed with the videos and the Robert Salas document, that'll all be linked. If you're listening or watching this, you can go check it out. Thank you again, Chris.
No, thank you, Zach. Thanks for having me. Great talk.